Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Fan Theories podcast. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This is our second episode. Hope you guys liked our pilot episode, which was all about Rogue One. Hopefully we'll get more theories correct than we did on that one.
Yeah,
because
who are we though? Who's talking here?
So I'm your host, Emily Kelly, joined as always by my partner and everything, Peter Cunin.
Hey guys.
This episode, of course, as we've promoted, will be about Westworld. So we're very excited to have joining us Carly Lane from Nerdist and the Mary Sue, who covered Westworld. Thank you so much for joining us, Carly.
Yay.
Yay. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's our pleasure. All right. So just to kind of give the audience a little bit of background.
Spoilers!
We are definitely going to be talking about spoilers. Like, this will basically all be spoilers. So if you haven't watched all of Westworld, you may want to do that because it's a fantastic show and then come back to this.
Binge that.
Like me. So for me, I didn't watch it week to week. I binged it all in one sitting pretty much, or two sittings, and then caught the finale like on the day. Carly, did you watched it week to week, I assume?
Yes, I did. Well, there was a period where I was a few episodes behind, and so I binged probably like 2 or 3 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And then Peter, you also
I watched up to I binge watched up to week 6 or the 6th episode, and then I was weekly after that.
Okay, cool. So that's where a lot of my questions come in, because a lot of this stuff was probably much more shocking, of like, oh man, like I can't believe I never saw this coming week to week. But like by the time I watched it, most of the major spoilers had already been talked about and written about.
Indeed.
So let's get to our main topic. What is the deal with Ford?
Yeah, Ford.
So Ford, played by the fantastic Anthony Hopkins. He dies in the season finale.
Yeah, he's godlike. He's the creator. It's funny to see him die at the very last moment of the last episode.
Yeah. Was this shocking to you, Carly? Like, were you watching it and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this?
A little bit, especially because of how obsessed he was with maintaining power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like hit the whole plot line where he's fighting the board and Tessa Thompson's character and all that. I was like, well, why then would he be so intent on seizing or maintaining the power that he already had in terms of like the narrative and the story and the reveries and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the big master plan was just to end with him getting shot in the head.
Exactly.
Right.
It's strange because you see him as like a godlike figure, somebody who wants to be in control, and for him to either program Dolores to shoot him or allow Arnold's programming to take hold, and so Dolores shoots him. Whatever the reason is, it's interesting to see him willingly give up his power.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And that was kind of like the first question I have is, was his death part of this overreaching narrative that he has crafted, or because she has finally achieved full consciousness and did it all on her own? What do you guys think?
I don't know. What do you think, Carly?
I feel like that's still the big question, because I wrote about the finale for Nerdist and kind of noted how Dolores and Maeve and a lot of the like female characters were among the leaders to kind of taking back the park, at least in terms of the hosts. But was that in Ford's plan all along? Or was that sort of a result of, like Maeve also kind of increased her consciousness level, her awareness level, at least in terms of being aware of her own state and her position and the park as a whole. So I don't know. I'm still very conflicted about it. And I feel like a lot of Ford's actions, especially early in the show, don't really seem to be in line with him maybe have spelling it out all along. I don't know. I feel like with Dolores, at least, in my mind, her journey was about self-revelation and self-discovery and having all these things where she realizes, oh, well, I was, I'm blanking on the name of the character that Teddy was so afraid of. She's like, that was me. And I,
Wyatt.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Who she
revelation
is.
that
Yeah.
she is Wyatt and all of that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this will all get answered, or at least some of it will get answered in season 2. But I mean, yeah, it's really hard because Ford obviously was a genius, and it is and that's kind of the point of Westworld too, of what is real and what is not. You know, that like especially with the book and the original movie, you know, like all the characters with their hands, like how do you know you're not real?
Mhm.
You know, how would they know that their decisions are not their own? So it does raise an incredibly thought-provoking, you know, philosophical debate.
Yeah, I'm trying really hard not to short circuit any of my brain cells
Yeah.
right now. But I would agree with both of you. Ford and Arnold seem like diametrically opposed at the beginning, and then you see Ford essentially agree with Arnold at the end and taking his own life.
Mhm.
So, or if that is the case, yeah, it's very interesting to see Ford's progression throughout the series, as well as Dolores, who I consider to be the protagonist of the
Mhm.
first season, at least. See her go through the maze and achieve sentience, and then Ford realizing this really was the maze was really the point of the park the whole time, and he's trying to give back to the host. At least that's what I'm hoping is the case here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, as much as we saw him, in my mind, ultimately, is he willing to die for the park, just as Arnold was willing to die for the hosts? He kind of seems like an egotistical sort of gentleman, a little bit.
Yeah, but at least Arnold was preserved in the programming. Hopefully, we'll see, or not hopefully, but it would be neat to see Ford program himself into all of the hosts for season 2 and see how that takes place, what unfolds, because now he's in there too.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of hosts, we obviously saw that he's not above making hosts of himself. He made himself as a little boy and his family. So Carly, do you think, I know this was kind of one of the prevailing theories after the finale, do you think that was really him, or perhaps a host version? Or if it was really him, that there is a host version out there somewhere that we'll see him again?
Yeah, that's a good, I hadn't even thought of that, to be honest. And honestly, I wouldn't put it past Ford to set up like a decoy version of himself and have that be, you know, maybe that's his plan, is for Dolores to kill the host version of himself. And then maybe find a way to lead like the host revolution, but he's still working behind the scenes to kind of orchestrate the whole thing. That actually feels legitimate to me, though, that it wouldn't actually be him.
Right. And that's kind of like, that plays into my mind of that he is only so much willing to give up control and to give up himself for this park, of, you know, he wants to seem self-sacrificial, but not really.
Right.
No.
So, and I mean, there was a part when Bernard kills Teresa that we see him in his, like, you know, secret lab making a new host. So that's what a lot of people were pointing to, like, oh, perhaps he was making a version of himself.
Yeah, you have to pay so much attention to this show sometimes. I mean, it's like, whoa, what happened on the battle diagram on his table? Oh, he's putting a new sequence into play, and you know, oh, he has this host on the table. He's making a new host. There's so many little things. You have to be so conscious and careful and looking at all these little pieces to see all the bigger picture. Yeah.
And did you read the book or see the original movie before watching the show, or since watching the show, Carly?
I haven't. And part of me does want to go back and read and watch the movie, and then probably watch the TV show again.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they've said that I don't know how much they're going to follow the movie, you know, and how accurately they're going to follow that. I think it'd be interesting to do like a compare and contrast. But I think that's the one thing where it's hard sometimes when you're adapting a TV show from a movie, is that you have to kind of plan out farther than the movie, or go more in depth than the movie ever did. And so I'm curious to see how the movie, the movie stands up But no, I was completely, I was a little bit aware that there had been previous adaptations, but I didn't watch any of that before the TV show.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I bring up the book and the movie, so because one of the major points in the book and the original movie of how you tell the difference between the hosts or the robots and humans is in your hands. So, and there was a lot of really good parts like in the show, like when I forgot the technician's name.
Sylvester or
one of those guys that helps Maeve, and he's having like this existential crisis, and he looks down at his hands. Right. Yeah, so he's like,
isn't there a point where she's kind of messing with him, and she's like, "You're not one of us. Come on."
Yeah, like how do you know you're not one of us?
Right.
Yeah. Right. So he looks at his hands, and so with this theory that Ford has created a host version of himself, or there's host versions that exist, a Redditor pointed out, I think you would say this name is Pluraline.
Yeah, Plurane. Yeah, something like that.
Plurine. Redditor points out that when Ford and Bernard shake hands, that Ford's hand looks weird. And so also on comicbook.com, Christian Hoffer said that in the close-up of their hands shaking, it looks like one of his knuckles might be out of place, like that, under the epidermis, the fake skin, that maybe one of his knuckles didn't get assembled correctly.
Could be.
So that's that's again, like you really have to pay so close attention.
It could also be that maybe Anthony Hopkins broke his fist at one time.
Weird hands.
Hello, Clarice. Smack. I don't know.
So it's one of the coolest things about this show. And I'm sure from writing about it, that, there are some people who pay such close attention, and there's so many little tiny details like that could really lend to some of these bigger theories.
Indeed.
Closer attention than me, I think, on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I feel you. Like there's very, like, you really, again, probably will all go back and watch it and realize more stuff on the second viewing for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is the likelihood that we will see Ford again, whether himself or a host version, or what is in your mind, percentage wise or otherwise, will we see Ford again in season 2? Carly?
Oh, 100%. In some form, I'm convinced he's not. This version, whatever it is, if it's the real one, if it's a host that he set up in place of himself to be killed on purpose, 100% he'll be back.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's 100%, but I would say like 99%. I hate going full throttle, But yeah, he is so egotistical and just so he has the brains to do it too, to see far enough down the line to make it in his favor. And so I think he's putting the chess moves in the right spot, and he's keeping his king safe, which we don't know how that is, whether he puts his mind in another body or whatever we were saying. It could be any of those things. But yes, I do believe we will see him season 2.
Yeah, I'm 100%.
Oh, wow. Oh, damn.
But again, full throttle. What form he will take, I'm very curious to see. And personally, since we saw him as a little boy, I think perhaps it would be interesting if he came back perhaps as his younger self. As
creepy kid. Oh, I love the
creepy kid was weird. Like maybe not creepy kid, but kind of in that one flashback that we saw where they just kind of like transposed Anthony Hopkins' younger-ish face on a younger-esque body. Because that's what he did for Bernard essentially as well, that Arnold wouldn't have aged at all. Maybe they want to go back to the good old days when they were discovering this new technology and the park wasn't so much about, like hedonism. Like it was about technology. Cool. Oh, there was one more point I actually wanted to bring up with Ford. Because there obviously was such a disparity in, he allowed Arnold to die for his beliefs, basically, or, he didn't seem super duper sad about it. So in your guys' mind for Ford, do you think he came to this realization that creating a robotic sentience is way more important than creating some Westworld park?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he sees it as his legacy, and he does he alludes to that many times, that this is his legacy, this is his life's work. And yeah, no, I totally see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carly, what do you think?
It's interesting because we never really we see him kind of challenging like other engineers over a narrative and saying, oh, I can't remember the one British guy who's kind of trying to create his own, and then Ford like shuts him down.
Sizemore, I think was his name.
He was such a tool too. Yeah. I hate that guy.
He was such a douchebag. And then he just goes and gets drunk the rest of the time, which I feel like is pretty relatable though.
Yeah.
Oh, my boss just shut down my whole idea I've been working on for months. What do I do? Go get plastered.
Did he die?
No.
He hasn't died yet?
No, he's back. Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think if anything though, that whole narrative was still a part of his big plan, and the day-to-day goings on of the park, he always seemed pretty willing to just overlook. Like if there were problems, he's like, whatever. He'd just be sitting in the basement having philosophical conversations with the old bartender, the host that was from his, a previous
version of
the park. I don't know. It always seems like he was above that and didn't really want to deal with, he would always pass those problems on down the line.
Sure. Yeah. All right. I like it.
All right, cool. Okay. So now let's move on to a section I lovingly like to call chaos theory.
Chaos theory.
Which are basically just theories that have either already been addressed, were super obvious, or were maybe just kind of dumb. We don't really have any dumb ones for this one. We had a few dumb ones for the Rogue One podcast, like that Jin was Captain Phasma. Like, please stop, move away from the computer, stop yourself.
Right.
So, and mostly I'm interested because, Carly, you watched it more week to week than we did. So the first one is that William is the Man in Black. So I'm really curious if when you were watching it, did you have any inklings that that's who the Man in Black was at the time? Because by the time I got to it, it was, I'd already gotten spoiled basically. So I'm really curious. Was there any clues? Did you have any did you think he was someone else? Maybe what about it? William as the Man in Black.
See, the funny thing is I didn't realize, and now I feel like this is where I have to go back and watch the show from the beginning and realize that you're basically talking about two totally different time frames that are occurring simultaneously in the same episode, and because it completely changed. I had friends that posited the theory pretty early on, and it was really funny because I think once that started circling through, like the blogs and and fan sites and everything. And then it was really funny to watch the creators be like, well, just wait and see. I think it was one of the ones that people figured out the fastest. So once it was a reveal for me, it was kind of like, oh, well, the internet already guessed it. Like it's not much of a twist. But then the twist for me was realizing that they've basically been running these narratives side by side when one of them is, years and years and years in the future.
Right.
And like, how does this change everything? Like,
it was pretty brilliant. Yeah.
Like, right. The whole plot with William and Dolores, where he's like falling in love with her. And then you're like, that completely changes how you look at how the Man in Black treats Dolores. And then you're realizing how long he's been coming to the park this whole time. And it completely changes everything. Like I'm definitely going to have to go back with this knowledge now and watch it. And it's, similar to Rogue One. I feel like it changes how you watch episode 4. Like now that I've had this reveal of William actually being the Man in Black, I'm going to have to go back and see how that changes my experience as an audience member with that knowledge in hand.
Yeah. It's a completely different context having, knowing what's happening. We watch the series, episode 1 through 10, but that's not chronological order.
Mm-mm.
So it wasn't so much. I figured out that the Man in Black was William at around episode like 5, I think, but that was because I was watching them back to back to back. I saw the clues, but seeing Dolores, and she was enacting some of the scenes just in her head as we were watching. It was mind blowing because they say that the hosts can't differentiate between memory and between what is currently happening, like their reality. And to see that happen in Dolores, it was so jarring, and it was brilliantly done. So I commend, the J.J. Abrams and all the everybody involved with that aspect of it, because that truly was mind blowing.
Yeah, I remember when I was binging it because I was sick, and so I was like sitting in bed watching these, and you were out here like playing games, and I think you just heard me in there and going, "What?"
Right.
Because it was like finally the realization, and I think it actually helped. I can't remember if we saw it before or after, but Arrival was kind of similar, of where you're basically telling a story in reverse,
Right.
or in like out of order, and so that kind of helped. Like, oh my god, of course, like because she's not wearing the same clothes in some scenes, and there's like one where she's running and then she was stabbed, but then she's not bloody anymore.
Right. That was a very big reveal.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my god, this is 2 timelines. Like that, besides the Man in Black thing, like, which was still a cool reveal because it was so kind of sad because William seemed like such a nice guy. That it was that you're running 2 consecutive narratives at one time was like brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
So good. All right, so let's talk about another reveal, that Bernard is Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was like, what, you guys, how does this even work? Like, how did no one realize it was him? Like, is the original team that they worked on the park with all dead?
But now,
like,
how does this work? Not to the audience, but to the people in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, no, I got it, but it was like, yeah, did like nobody? Does he have no family anymore?
Yeah, the other people working in Westworld should have figured out. Oh, this person is not Bernard. He's Arnold. I've seen the pictures of Arnold before, so that is a little weird.
Yeah, it was so. This is one of the weirdest ones.
Maybe Ford struck every picture of Arnold so that he could create Bernard. That's a possibility.
I don't
That'd
know.
Be like there's not enough visual evidence behind to kind of. I would buy that, honestly. I feel like Ford would have enough influence to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe Arnold was like a huge recluse.
That's true. Like maybe he was a hermit.
Good point.
But like, and then here's my question of like, so was Bernard's child and wife Bernard's, or was that Arnold's? I don't know.
I think it was set up by Ford. So to convince Bernard that he was someone else.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It seems like it was a devising of Ford the whole time.
So it was what they call, I think, the cornerstone or corner memory or whatever.
Oh, right.
That would have been Bernard's. Gotcha. So you don't think Arnold in the real life had a human child of his own?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like for me, the revelation that Bernard was actually a host before I knew he was Arnold was the most devastating, because you see him going back through his entire recollection and everything that we've seen him do on the show so far, and realizing that none of it is real, and you're like, oh
yeah,
and man,
so heartbreaking. Ugh.
Oh, the acting was so well done.
Yeah.
I mean, you break with him when he realizes.
Jeffrey Wright is always brilliant.
Always,
phenomenal. So good.
And especially in this instance, because so now that it's been revealed, and now that he as a host is also free, hopefully, it's going to be so crazy to have him, this juxtaposition of that he is both creation and creator, because he helped a lot. He built a lot of these other hosts and was an integral part of the park. Like, that's going to be, it's going to be gnarly.
He might even be the next antagonist, where we saw Ford as the antagonist in the first one. There might be some weird, I don't know, virus, or maybe his programming goes a little off and his perception of what Westworld should be is a little different than what the hosts feel. Who knows? He might even be Wyatt's right-hand man or woman, however that works. So yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of possibility, and I'm interested to see what happens.
Okay.
Moving along.
So, since we now know that Bernard is based on Arnold, is basically Arnold. This was kind of a sick, sort of morbid thought that Peter had this morning of, could the other hosts be based on people? Like, did Ford just like travel the country and like look in morgues and be like, she's cute. I'll use her face, for a prostitute or something. Like, what do you think?
Are they fully created, or do you take aspects and traits and physical characteristics, or even just real people, you steal their body or whatever, and then you make a new host? So I'm curious, where does the design for each host come from?
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's a good question. I feel like if anything, he would take personality traits before he would take like physical resemblance.
Yeah. Because I was thinking
that he knew. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was thinking that like it could possibly be that these are all essentially zombies that have been like human beings that have been brought to life, and then their code, their makeup, whatever you want to call it, their computer code has been altered by Ford and the rest to make them just hosts instead of human beings.
Well, they have circuits and stuff.
Well,
they are built.
The first ones were completely robotic, but these. The ones that we see in whatever 2052 or whatever the year is, they're all synthetic, biosynthetic
no, they
material.
still have stuff. She still has that Maeve. They cut Maeve open, and she's not guts or anything in there.
Oh,
yeah.
So it's not.
Yeah, when they make Dolores. Remember when they make Dolores that like disturbing scene where she they make her look at her own insides.
Yeah, I only thought that she had those circuits though because it was a previous version where it was.
Yeah, she is the older one, but Maeve. I mean, we see them rebuild Maeve, and I mean, she has like bones and stuff, but she doesn't have organs.
Which are those synthetic too? Because I mean, we see hosts bleed, and we see them. I mean, as far as I know, that seems like it's a synthetic. Like it's not organic, organically based. It's probably some kind of thing that they've constructed so that they can bleed believably, and which is disturbing in itself.
Perhaps not the bodies themselves, but definitely characteristics and consciousness, perhaps. Okay, all right.
Yeah, actually, I don't have it in the show notes here, but I actually had a lot of questions about this when I first watched the show. Because we see them eat and drink, and I think we actually see the God, I forget his name. He's so good. He's so funny in the show. The bandit sort of guy.
Oh yeah.
I forget what his name is.
The hot guy with the snake tattoo lady.
Yes. We see him pee. So how does that work?
Got to refill the bladder fluids, I guess.
There's a lot of technical questions I have about their anatomy and stuff, which we probably can't answer, but I kind of hope they do. Those are the things that always fascinate me. When I play Mass Effect or some other space game, I'm like, okay, but how is their reproduction? How do they have kids? What are their parts like? Where are their organs in their body?
Right.
I'm the daughter of a physical therapist and the granddaughter of an anthropologist. So
these are questions that are asked.
These are all questions.
So let's see. Let's go into the next point. Westworld, where does it take place? Does it take place on Earth? Some people say it might be underground. It could be in space. It could be like a Death Star sort of. That's no moon sort of thing. I think it's in space, personally. I'm going to keep it short. I think it's in space. I don't know if it's a moon or a Death Star-like object, but yeah, I would say it's in space. What do you think, Carly?
See, and I'm curious too, because we see the guests, don't they take a train to go to and from? And so from that, I always thought it was underground. Maybe it's on another planet underground somehow, or somehow the entrance is underground, but then it takes them to the park, which is above ground.
That's actually a really good point. Perhaps most of civilization is now living underground for whatever reason, and you can take a train to the surface that is essentially a playground now. That's a possibility.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I was thinking, just from a logistical standpoint, I suppose there are lots of places in Utah or Arizona that are just, open. But this is huge. And especially if there's more than one park, like, are they all in the same place? Or it's like, Westworld is like in Arizona, and then Samurai World is in rural Japan or something. It's definitely a really interesting question. And that's why I was almost kind of bummed, like, that Maeve we didn't see her like make it out, because I wanted to see what the outside world was like. And we were talking this morning too of like, the types of people who come to the park are obviously wealthy, because we would assume that you have to have a lot of money to come here.
Well, they also say that.
Yeah, they also say that. And I mean, just like Logan is a prime example of like just how like sick and like demented and like sort of crazy the people who come here perhaps are. Like, what has happened in the world? Like, to be fair, there's probably a lot of people in the world right now who are like that. But like, what has happened in our world that this is like an escape? Like what they do point out.
It's a Trump presidency, obviously.
Obviously, they do point out. I think that the world has like been largely eradicated of like disease and stuff. So maybe it's just sort of they have no conflict in their world, and so they come to these parks to have conflict. So.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this on the piece that I wrote for Nerdist, but it seems like the park is basically there for people to act on impulses or urges that they might be curbing. So that could also, lend itself to the theory that it's like a futuristic society. Maybe a lot of things have been like outlawed, or the government is a little bit more, I don't know. It's less of a like, oh, you have the freedom to do anything you want. Things are more restrictive. And so the rich and powerful come to Westworld to act on some things that they wouldn't be able to get away with in whatever society this is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
true.
That makes sense.
So since we're talking about it, there was like this whole thing of, if you go on like the fake Delos Inc. website, you can see like fake security footage of Maeve escaping, and it was timestamped 2052. And so that's why people are like, oh, okay, it takes place in 2052, which this is one of my favorite theories, because it makes like legit the most sense out of, any of these unproven, quote unquote, unproven ones, because it would mean that William first came to the park in 2017. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it too.
And that would be enough of a time. I mean, 2017 is a bit hard. I can't see someone building a park in that time, but
let alone in space. So my favorite,
yeah. But by 2052 it would be perfected, I suppose. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of one of those like base fan theories. You're like, oh, okay, nailed it.
Yeah.
Good job, everyone. So the last like chaos theory I just want to touch on really quickly before we move on to some of our other subtopics, that the maze represents consciousness. Like, again, that this was one of those where if you're watching it week to week, maybe this was more of a like an aha moment for you. Because I binged, it was sort of like, oh, I mean, duh, of course, that's what it was. Like, there's no physical place, center of the maze. Was this a good reveal for you, Carly? Was it kind of another one like the time thing? We're like, oh, of course, this makes so much sense now.
Yeah, I guess for me, it seems a little bit odd that there were so many like clues, for hosts that I guess that were designed for hosts to find, like why there was that one host that had the map like on the inside of his head, like his
that was weird, right?
It was weird.
And I was like, was Dolores meant to find that? Because I don't understand with her, like with her whole storyline, how she would even, manage that.
It's probably Ford just trolling. He's like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if I put the map right here? Nobody will know what it means. I'm also going to put on this table, just this one table, see if anybody gets it.
Right. That part seemed a little bit odd. Like there would literally be breadcrumbs in the park if all the maze is supposed to represent is this kind of internal, discovery that you make about yourself as a host. Like, why would you leave literal like Hansel and Gretel
breadcrumbs?
But, it was odd to me. And then but I did like the whole Man in Black, his obsession with discovering it, because he thinks it's this concrete, tangible like the ultimate level. I remember, I think it was on Vulture. I read this great piece that basically compares him to like the worst kind of gamer, where they're like, he's like obsessed with, reaching the ultimate status and like OP and,
Right.
and needs to get play all the way to the end. And,
okay, equip your boots of hate and a sword of Dementors. Like, okay.
leveled up to like 100, and then he's like he wants to like complete Westworld, which I thought was really interesting and a really an interpretation of his character that I hadn't considered before. But I did like at the end where we realized that, I think Dolores at one point is like, it's not for you. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, girl, you tell him.
Yeah, girl, you do it.
It'll be interesting though, because it's Dolores and Maeve who are for sure conscious, right? Like they've reached the maze.
Yeah.
Can we
and
say
by
that?
themselves.
By themselves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other hosts have now been awakened through like code, I suppose, or his narrative.
Yeah. But now I'm thinking that this literally just occurred to me. There are two who have achieved consciousness, and that automatically breeds some antagonism, some hostility, because are they going to pair up and they're going to be goody, or is it going to be like, well, my vision of what the host should be is different than what your vision of the host should be. So maybe that'll be a conflict in season 2.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Just more Thandie Newton, just all for forever. Please.
Yes.
So speaking of William, now let's move on to some smaller topics throughout the show. He obviously, we just touched on it, that his whole thing about the park is that he spent the last 35 years wanting the park to be real, that his quote unquote real life. He doesn't feel real in his real life. He feels the most real in this fake life in the park. So that's why his obsession with the maze, that he is basically bored at this point. Like, so that's why he went after Maeve.
Maeve's name is close to Maze.
It's so obvious now.
Oh my God. That he went after Maeve to see, what's the most brutal thing I could possibly do. And of course, this is where he figures out this compassion matrix that she has. So during the party, he, is kind of, bumming, his plan has failed to find the center of the maze. And then he sees all of the hosts come through the trees, like one of the coolest TV moments like ever.
Yeah, he gets shot in the arm and then smiles.
Yeah, and he's like, yes, this is what I wanted. So he will probably be okay for season 2. Like, so now we're kind of getting into some season 2 topics. I mean, getting shot in the arm, not that bad. And this is, I think he and Ford, we can see them in their interaction. They have, like a rivalry of some sorts. They have a healthy respect for each other. So I think this is kind of, it was almost Ford's like little last goodbye of like, here you go, be careful what you wish for, because now they will kill you. So do you think he'll survive? Do you think he'll be okay? At least into season 2. He might not survive season 2, but we'll at least see the Man in Black, William, again.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's terrible because I think at one point they actually asked the actor, like, are you coming back? And he was like, yes. So
okay, good.
Sorry to put a pin in that theory, but he basically already confirmed.
Okay, good.
In some capacity. I don't know exactly how, or he didn't say, I'll definitely be back for the whole season. He was like, no, I'm coming back for season 2. So
right.
Oh no, I'm for sure there. But I also heard that Anthony Hopkins is not, at least his physical, like the actor, Anthony Hopkins is not going to be in season 2. That's what I heard, that they gave him a farewell at the end of season 1. Oh. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I do think we'll see Ford again, not to get off topic. We'll see Ford again, but I don't think it'll be Anthony Hopkins.
All right, cool. So we see little snippets throughout when Maeve is kind of touring the facility of potentially other worlds. So we see Samurai World. We see some of the samurais. I think we hear like some advertisement for Samurai World. And in the original movie, the park is actually separated into like 3 parts, not just, separate parks. So do you think we'll see other worlds in season 2? And if you could, maybe Samurai World would be super cool. What other worlds potentially would you like to see?
It's a good question.
Carly,
that's a good question. I Samurai World, I feel like they're probably not going to introduce right away. I could see them introducing it like the end of season 2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or somehow finding a way to tie it in if there is kind of like a host rebellion. But I don't know, in terms of other worlds, I hadn't even thought about that.
Well,
I would assume like if this is a futuristic society and they're kind of using a lot of these parks as like nostalgia fueled, callbacks to like days of yore when you could ride around on horses and shoot people without consequences. That's a good question. Are there way, like, how many other parks are there in like the movies? Because I'm wondering if they're going to pull from that.
Yeah, I think there's two other parks. So two other parks. I think it's Westworld, and then I think there's like a samurai type world, and I don't remember what the
Greek Roman. So
Roman, like
okay,
world or something. So it's all like violent, it's like violence.
Yeah, but if I could choose like a fun world, like you have to think about what is the purpose of the park. Is it to release, like we said, these inhibitions that we have, so we can get them, out there, so we don't feel all constrained by what the current political climate's like, Trump. But if we could see anything, it would be fun to see sci-fi or something that is not the past. So I think that would be kind of neat to see.
Mm-hmm. I would want to see, maybe like medieval world would be cool. That's another sort of bygone era that people seem obsessed with. Or some sort of, probably there's some people out there obviously would like a 50s world because,
make America great again.
Yeah.
Or like a 20s world, like Prohibition.
Yeah, exactly. So like gangsters, like that would be fun because then you can still shoot people and there's boozing and stuff, but maybe not so much of the old timey kind of. Yeah, 20s would be cool. Gangsters and stuff.
It'd also be cool to do like a fantasy, like pure fantasy world, almost like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, because the same network. Hey, just get some B footage from Game of Thrones.
Just borrow some costuming stuff.
There's Jon Snow. Who's Jon Snow?
Well, I think we can all agree that Maeve stole the show.
Pretty much.
Evan Rachel Wood as Dolores was fantastic, but Thandie Newton was just, she was so good, man. So, and her story was probably the most interesting because we got to see her like evolution in real time, basically. So when she's leaving and she has this choice of I could go and leave this place forever and go and see the quote unquote real world, or I could go to this other park and save my
quote unquote daughter.
Yeah, fake daughter, basically. And of course, we learn Bernard shows her that in Ford's new narrative, she's meant to escape. He wanted her to leave the park and he wrote it into her loop. And so the fact that she doesn't leave, is this the first evidence that her loop is broken, that she is fully awake, that she's fully sentient?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would argue it's her choice, just because if she had every opportunity, she's on the train and then she steps off and goes back. And it's interesting because now I'm wondering, she basically manipulates the engineers, those two guys who were great.
Felix and Sylvester. That's their
yes.
name.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Like increasing her awareness level. Which now I'm wondering, was that in Ford's plan, or was that something where once she realized it was an option that was available to her, like her personality was kind of like, oh, I want that, like give that to me, like did he plan that maybe she would try to escape but not necessarily be as sentient as she was, or was that like her achieving the consciousness, and the heightened knowledge and all that stuff, where they basically take her abilities and like drag it up to 100, 120%. Was that part of his plan too? That's another thing I question, is if he intended for that to happen, or if she would have escaped no matter what.
Yeah. And that's really, I don't know if we'll ever know that that question, or the answer to that question.
It boggles the mind.
Right. Yeah, I think she did achieve full sentience. I don't know if Ford intended for her to leave, but I think he intended.
He did.
Well, I think he intended for her to have to make her own decision if she had reached the end of the maze.
Oh,
You know, like this is the
I
final
see.
test. Essentially, you're at the middle of the maze. Do you continue your programming, or do you do what you want to do? Dolores didn't really have the option. She achieved full consciousness, but then the programming was still there for her to finish out her last, programming or whatever to incite the revolution.
Right.
Maeve did it on her own, essentially.
True. That's a good point. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I think there might be conflict between Dolores and Maeve. Dolores might be the religious sort of like, oh, praise the word of Arnold, and then Maeve will just be like, no, we're in it for ourselves. Praise yourself. Praise the hosts. So
Love it.
yeah, that's where I'm going with it.
I like it. Well, we'll obviously see the main characters once again. Maeve, Dolores, Teddy, perhaps. Man in Black, definitely. So let's talk about some other characters that are potentially dead or potentially just sort of taking a little break. So the first is Elsie. She was Bernard's assistant or associate.
And we see Bernard choke her out.
Yeah. So, but like maybe it was just like a go to sleep sort of choke out.
Yeah.
Like I can't have you messing up all my plans.
Yeah, just
like
a quick John Cena, you know?
Yeah, just like hang out here for like a couple months while this gets all figured out. What do you think, Carly?
Didn't we see Bernard kill Elsie though?
I thought we just saw him like choke her,
right?
But I don't know if she's dead.
And then there is this theory. If you go to the website and you look at the code, because you don't get a full picture or information or anything, you get a bunch of code, and then if you translate the code, you get an audio message, and the audio message sounds like it's from Elsie. And the timestamp would have been after she, quote unquote, died.
Interesting.
So that was one of the things fanboys around, and girls, fan people everywhere were thinking.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, she could totally be dead, though.
She could totally be dead, and the theory is out the window.
Yeah. Also, Stubbs, he was the security officer, one of the Hemsworth brothers.
Yep.
We saw him getting tackled by the Ghost Nation guys. Once again, maybe they were just sort of like keeping him so that he didn't ruin Ford's plans.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was like the first or second. I can't remember the order of human casualties versus host, but
yeah, I do think we'll see Stubbs again. Just a flying hug, by the Ghost Nation. I don't think it's enough to take Stubbs out. What do you think, Carly? You think Stubbs is coming back?
A flying hug.
Yeah.
Stubbs. I feel like he's going to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we saw enough of him to establish, oh, he's dead already. Like, I see some more from Mr. Hemsworth.
Yeah. Because in my mind, like in my headcanon, it was like Bernard and Ford were like, hey, these people are cool and smart. Like, maybe we'll just hang on to them. And like, they'll just hang out with the hosts that have already been awakened, and they're kind of their prisoners perhaps, but maybe they're helping them like get awake and stuff.
Behind enemy lines sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I hope, because I liked them. They were cool.
Same.
Let's talk about someone who's not as nice or cool as them. Logan.
Yeah.
Which, when I first saw Ben Barnes, I was like, no, Prince Caspian, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you saying those things? He was like one of those characters where he's like the best worst. Like, he was obviously a terrible person, but you kind of liked him a little bit, where you're like, well, you just seem, you're all right. You're sort of a dick, but, So the last we saw him, William had put him naked on a horse and kind of sent him on his way. But probably he's okay, right? I mean, I can't imagine that William left the park and still got to marry his sister if he like murdered him in this park, on their like bro vacation.
Yeah, it's a mystery where he is now.
Yeah.
I'd like to think he's still in the park, just being a hermit, in the corner,
like someplace. A mountain man.
Yeah. Totally grizzled now. I think he's alive someplace. What's that?
I feel like it's one of those things where they had a very specific dynamic when they first came into the park, and Logan was clearly like the dick, and then William was, kind of more of like the meeker guy. And then at the end, their roles are definitely reversed. And I almost feel like it's going to be the kind of thing where he eventually treks back and he's super embarrassed. And then when they get back to the real world, they're like, never speak of this again. But like moving forward, their relationship is always different.
Right.
Because William is like, remember when I owned you? Like,
for sure. Because I mean, he still married his sister, and then obviously from the dialogue and stuff that we hear, that William became extremely successful and basically owns Delos, right? And that was Logan's family's company 35 years ago. So,
but if Logan's not running it, and
but
I
think Carly's probably right. Like that. They came back to the real world and Logan's like, okay, bro, I saw some dark stuff from you. I'm not going to mess with you anymore. Like, you can marry my sister. You can run this company. Like, we're cool,
So
bro.
he's just super weak on the outside and dying a slow,
alcohol death or something.
Alcohol, lonely death. Gotcha.
I just think he got really intimidated, among other things, by William. And moving forward, their relationship is just going to be different. Because it seemed like from the beginning that Logan was definitely the more dominant personality at first, and he would kind of like bully William into stuff. And now it's going to be interesting to see if that shifts moving forward. Because they were going to be future in-laws.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. And the last one I want to talk about is Abernathy, Dolores's original father. So we saw Sizemore and colluding to smuggle the park data out via Abernathy. Did he make it? Like, was he among those who stormed the party? And if he did make it out, what could that mean for the future of the park? Like, will another company try to come in? Will there be sort of like replica parks, like knockoff sort of parks? What do you guys think?
I want to hear what Carly has to say first, because I'm not sure.
It didn't seem like though that they were discovered in terms of smuggling out the data. I don't know. Now I'm like debate, because then there was the whole thing with the host that killed himself, like bashed his own head in.
Right.
And they were like, why does he have a weird cable in his body? And that was part of the whole thing that Elsie was investigating before she got choked out, presumably killed. We don't know.
Yeah, the entire first season, they're trying to get information about the park out of the park. That was like one of the driving plot points. So, I mean, I would have to say, yes, he got out of the park, and that's going to further develop the story in season 2. I think that's what I'd like to say. I don't think he's still in the park. I don't think he, I think he's out, and I think he's being dissected, and the data is being recovered by whoever's recovering it.
Mysterious parties unknown.
But didn't they also say it was Delos? Delos was stealing their own information so that Ford was...
Yeah, they were siphoning, because that was the whole thing with like Tessa Thompson's got involved a little bit, and like she was connected to the whole thing of, siphoning. I think it was like the company trying to do it from Ford.
All right, cool. So with Ford dead, if that information was out, I suppose that the park could still live on.
Right.
So, all right, cool. Yeah. All right.
Nice. Good job, guys.
Well, Carly, was there any other fan theories like that you're aware of that you really liked, or anything you want to touch, anything else you want to think about or touch on for season 2, or think back on season 1?
That's a good question. And now I'm like thinking about everything. I'm curious now. I just want to know how they're going to move forward from here, because they're having a whole like banquet with guests, and the activated hosts are coming out of the forest, like
murdering everyone.
Would you
murdering everyone?
Yeah. Would you say the hosts are in control of the park? That there is like Delos is out of control?
I don't think that's the case yet. I think we're probably going to get an interesting situation where, like, there's probably going to be an attempt to control them, and then they're going to just overtake everything. Because it seems like we're at the beginning. We're like at the very beginning of the rebellion.
Right.
Yeah, it feels like we're almost at the very beginning of the story. Like the whole season 1 was
like a prequel almost.
pretty much.
Yeah.
It was build up. Like,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's almost like JJ learned his lesson from Lost. He's like, I'm not going to do all of these things right now. I'm just going to do like a base and we'll figure it out. Yeah.
God, I hope so.
I hope so too.
Because it's very confusing,
Yeah, it's
JJ.
not an angel's dream or whatever the heck that was.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. All right. Well, Carly, this was so fun.
This was awesome. I hope you come back.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for joining us. So where can people find you on the interwebs?
People can follow me on Twitter at my name, Carly Lane. And like we briefly discussed before, I am writing for Nerdist at the moment, getting ready to recap some spring TV soon. So Twitter is basically where you can keep up with me and all of my writing, and because I post everything there. So that's the easiest spot.
Great. And our next show, Fan Theories, will be in February. I believe it's February the 27th. It's the last Monday of the month. So February 27th. Going forward, our shows will be on the There Network on the last Monday of every month. So that's hopefully easy for people to remember. We might start speeding up the schedule a little bit as we get going, but for now, once a month, you get your taste of Fan Theories, you think about it, you come back. We are not sure what our next topic is going to be.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be good, I hope. So if you guys, listeners, have any ideas, broad topics or otherwise, send it our way. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @EmilyKelly, Kelley.
And you can find me, Peter Cunin, at Screenwriter on Instagram and on Twitter.
You can also follow the There Network. That's there.network. You can subscribe to our podcast as well as all the other super cool podcasts there on the There Network through SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play. A lot of great stuff on there. The Todd and Taylor show in particular is super fun. And of course, we would love it if you guys would subscribe to our show as well. Well, this was an excellent podcast. Thank you so much again, Carly, for joining us.
It was wonderful to have you on.
Yeah.
It was wonderful to be on.
Okay. And thank you all for tuning in and listening. We hope you had a blast. We hope we boggled your mind a little bit with some Westworld theories. And
I am I'm short-circuited right now.
My brain hurts a little bit. And also,
Thoroughly boggled.
Thoroughly boggled. If we missed any theories, also please reach out to us because maybe we'll do a follow-up show or maybe we'll do something for season 2. All right? Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Carly, for joining us, and we will see you guys in the next one.
Love you. Bye.